creating the ideal health kit for living on the land and off-grid. Herbal Medicine, presented by Susanne Kaiser, Herbalist. Hosted by Anthony Lovage. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe. This is ConsciousEarthAlliance.com.
I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to Susanne Kaiser.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here. Yeah. So we've got 13 minutes. I'm going to, obviously, this is a very, very brief introduction to herbal medicine and what you can do. And I think one of the benefits of using herbal medicine is really because it's very cheap, it's easy, it's easily accessible. And for all of you, if you're living off grid in particular, you know, have a lot of nature around you perhaps, and some of these plants are very easy to grow as well. So it's something that you can do very quickly as soon as you're moving somewhere. So it's really fantastic. And I think apart from anything else, just the engagement with nature in itself is a medicine. So that's one of the best kind of things anyway. That's therapeutic. So the health kit, I'm just going to talk about wild foraging, easy growing herbs, and then some kitchen remedies. And I'll give you a few resources as well that you could use. So foraging, this again, obviously is not an extensive list, but it's just some of the key ones that I tend to focus on that I harvest. Obviously, it depends on where you are, but these are some of the main ones. So in the UK and Europe, you would primarily go for things like elderflower, hawthorn, elderberry, dandelion leaf, dandelion root, self-heal, nettle, plantain, yarrow, mullein, turkey tail, and roses. So the reason why I've chosen these is because if you look at the properties of all of these, basically there are hundreds of herbs and they all have very similar, different herbs of similar properties, and you can use them depending on what you want them for. So you have lots of herbs that will be anti-inflammatory, and you can use different herbs depending on the season. So here on this list, for example, you have elderflower, which is a really good anti-inflammatory herb, and it's good for flus, but it's also good for colds, and it's very good for hay fever at the beginning of the season. So that's something you could use all the way through. You've got hawthorn, which is the most excellent herb, which anyone over 50, my teacher used to say, my old teacher, should take hawthorn on a regular basis. Elderberry, of course, especially in these viral times that we're in, using elderberries always need to be cooked or made into tinctures you could use. And then we have other things like simple things like dandelion leaf, which you can use as food or dry them, dandelion root, self-heal, which is a lovely plant, which a lot of you will probably know if you're living in nature, and it's fantastic for healing, so you can make lovely ointments. Nettle, and nettle is an interesting one. So here I've got, for example, nettle seeds, but so nettle seeds are really interesting. They're a bit like a tonic, like an adaptogen we call them, which helps the body to cope with stress better. So you can use nettle seeds. You can also use the nettle leaves, which are actually used for as an anti-inflammatory and for hay fever, and also as a tonic. And then you can use the nettle root as well, which is very useful for regulating a male and to some extent female hormones as well. So the whole nettle, the humble nettle that is everywhere, and is considered to be a bit of a pest a lot of the time, is actually one of the most superior medicinal plants that we have in Europe for sure. Plantain, we mentioned, yarrow, mullein is fantastic. Mullein, we can use the flowers, and then we can use them as a cough remedy, and we can also use the leaves as again for cough, but more for soothing a cough, and then also for the gastrointestinal tract. So you could use the mullein and make a tea, for example. Yeah. And then turkey tail is an interesting one, and that's a mushroom, and you'll probably see that because it's very, very abundant. And if you use turkey tail, you can just pick it, you dry it, you can have it as a tea, you can dry it and make it into powders and have that. And that's actually a very excellent anti-cancer remedy, and just supports the immune system in general. And then, of course, roses, which you can have wild roses, you can have the rose hips for vitamin C, and the flavonoid content. So it's a really good booster for the immune system. And you can also use the rose, the petals, and that's makes a really good remedy if you want something astringent, so something that's very healing, that's drying. So as a healing remedy, and also internally, if you make a tincture, for example, and I'll talk about that in a second, then that's really wonderful because it's very good for the heart as well. So often you will combine hawthorn and rose together, for example, if somebody's had a bereavement or if they feel traumatized or they've been experiencing difficult times. Okay, so these are some of the herbs that you can forage. The main thing about foraging, obviously, is always make sure that you definitely have the right plants. But then as long as you do that, I guess the only one here on this list is the mullein. If you are picking mullein, make sure it is mullein and it's not one of the other plants, herbs, which it could be confused with. So mullein is very fleshy and thick and has got lots of hair on it. Yeah. So then if we go looking at easy growing herbs. So the one in the picture, I just really love Heart's Ease. It's such a beautiful, friendly, lovely little flower anyway, and it just goes on forever. And pansies and so on. And Heart's Ease in particular is very good. So it's excellent for all of you who are working a lot on the land. So you're using your hands, you can make a gorgeous ointment with Heart's Ease and make just a hand lotion, yeah, with Heart's Ease and marigold, and it will really help to really soothe the skin and keep it from cracking. Other really easy growing herbs would be rosemary, sage, thyme, the old classics, the marigold that I mentioned. I picked these earlier, and they really seem to grow all year through, even though they're annual plants. That means they only really grow for 1 year. But because they're self-seed and they seed very easily, you just get the next generation coming up and up and up. And so when you make a marigold cream, for example, most of the time you just, for the tea as well, you often just use the petals. But if you make a cream and ointment, you can see here the calyx, it's where the little florets sit, and that's got lots of resin in it because it's the resin that you usually want to utilize for the cream. So you would chop the marigolds up, put them in some oil, and then in a pot or something, you will boil that for an hour to 2 hours, strain it, and then add a little bit of beeswax. So the ratio is 100 mils of oil, infused oil with the calendula, and 10 grams of beeswax. So then you get a nice consistency, not too hard, not too soft. And then you can use that as an ointment after you've washed your hands or in between. And if you want something that's slightly anti-inflammatory as well, you can add a few sprigs of thyme or rosemary because they're very anti-inflammatory and they're also, again, very good for the hands. Yeah. Fennel is great. That self-seeds easily as well. Coriander, obviously, that's a really good one, especially for helping detoxification. So perhaps you were exposed to a little bit more toxins if you lived in a more urban environment or in agricultural environment settings. And so having coriander on a regular basis is really good for detoxification, as is parsley. Parsley is very, very good for the, especially for the kidneys. So if you integrate parsley into your diet on a regular basis, that will help detoxification as well. And then the other one I wanted to mention is the Artemisia annua, which is the sweet annie. And that's a fantastic herb, but it's an annual, so you have to grow it every year. But this is especially important in these, again, viral times that we're having, because there's quite a lot of research that actually shows that Artemisia annua is very effective against various coronavirus mutations and coronaviruses in general, as well as parasites. So this is a great herb to have. Also, if you have livestock, for example, you can use it, and you can also make infusions with it and spray your plants as a natural kind of pesticide, insecticide, and it doesn't harm the plant, and it grows very easily. Yeah, and it's actually the basis of the more modern malaria medication. So, and also you'll also read about Artemisia annua, another herb that's used as a sort of cancer, anti-cancer, preventative for cancer medicine. Then we've got echinacea, of course. So we often, you probably bought echinacea at some point, but actually echinacea grows really easily. Echinacea purpurea, which is the one that you usually see, which has got the petals up, or the little florets are up. And that grows really, really easily. It's quite robust. So you can definitely grow that. And then you can make a tincture or dry the leaves and the root. The root is a little bit stronger. So it's good to use the roots as well. So you just collect the seeds and then you grow it again in the next year. Peppermint, of course, just be careful with peppermint. I always keep it in pots because it does tend to spread very quickly. And then it also doesn't look so nice. So it's a nice one to do. And if you have a lot of mice, which we have here or had here before, it's a good idea to grow peppermint strategically around the house or around the dwelling as well, because mice really do not like peppermint. So you can use that, or you can make infused oils. You can dry peppermint and put it strategically in places where the mice usually come in, and then it's just not that attractive to them anymore. And heart ease we already talked about. So make an ointment. Okay, and then kitchen remedies. So on that picture is, I was very happy the other day. We found quite a few puffballs. We don't have so many mushrooms here, surprisingly, but these we had, and we really enjoyed them and loved them. And mushrooms in general, any mushrooms that you can find, of course, that are edible, and the mushrooms that you can buy, all have immunomodulating properties. So immunomodulating means that it regulates the immune system. So if the immune system is too active, it tends to downregulate it. If it's underactive, it tends to upregulate it. So they're really wonderful. It's a really wonderful food, and try and have mushrooms in one shape or form every day, really, in your diet if you can. Lots of vitamin D, really good source of protein. You've got a lot of other compounds in it. So that's really something fantastic to add. And you can very easily help promote the growth of some of these mushrooms as well. If you just get some and then you spread the spores. You can also get very, very cheaply, you can grow them in coffee grounds, for example. So there are lots of options now. So if you try and do that, that's a really good kind of kitchen remedy to use on a daily basis. And we also then have garlic, the sort of obvious ones: garlic, honey, fennel, turmeric, marjoram. Marjoram is a good one for men and women, but for women in particular, if women are suffering from menstrual problems, drinking marjoram tea about a week before the period is very helpful. And on the days of the period, if you have 2 or 3 cups, and it really helps with period pain. So that's a really nice, simple remedy that you can try straight away. And also for young girls when they're often starting their period, so just having a cup of marjoram tea in the time leading up to the period is very helpful. Garlic, onion, antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, really. You can use them with honey, which is also antiseptic. Then for the digestive tract, you have fennel, aniseed, star anise, cumin, caraway. They're all really good for the digestive tract. The cinnamon is good if somebody has blood sugar imbalances, for example, or pre-diabetic, or even for diabetes. You would have a teaspoon of cinnamon a day at least, and then that is very helpful for blood sugar regulation. And horseradish, if you're growing horseradish, that's fantastic. So use the horseradish, grate it, and then at the first sign of a cold or any infection, just immediately ingest some horseradish. You can also grate the horseradish and put it in honey. And then after a couple of days, you strain it and you get this really strong, potent honey, medicinal honey with the horseradish. And that basically drives away all viruses and bacteria and any other unpleasant things that we don't want. So how do we use them? And sorry, I've completely lost track of time now. So a couple more minutes, right? I think, yeah. How do we use it? So herbs and spices. Oops. So there's a list here. So you can make tinctures. So tinctures are basically where you use alcohol. So I've got one here. I don't know if you can see it. This is hawthorn and rosehip together. Okay. And so it's basically just fresh herbs in vodka or brandy, whatever you prefer. Keep it out of the sun, put it on the shelf, shake it every day for about 2 weeks. Then you strain it and you've got your tincture, which you can then bottle, and that lasts for a year or 2 years even. Yeah. Infusion. So you're using either the dried herbs, or you can use fresh herbs. Like you could just make a tea with the something like the marigold. If there are any aromatics in there, just cover the cup, and then you don't lose the essential oils that are in there. You can do cold infusions. That picture on the slide is a cold infusion of nettle and cleavers, and nettle and cleavers in the spring is the best spring tonic. So if you just do it just like that, and then don't cover it because it will just get completely black because there's so many nutrients in it, but you could leave it over like this overnight, and then the next morning you strain it and you see that the water's turned pink because it's so full of minerals. So please try this. This is one of my favorite things. You can still do it now as well. If you've still got access to fresh nettles, do it now, leave it overnight. The next morning, you've got this beautiful, gorgeous, really delicious tasting pink liquid actually, which is surprising because nettle tea is not everybody's kind of, yeah, it doesn't always taste that nice, but definitely cold nettle infusion is fantastic. Decoction when you have roots, yeah, so you want to boil them, and 5 or 10 minutes usually. So dandelion root, for example, if you want liver support for digestion, you could get the dandelion and you could just boil it and then have that during the day, or have it with food, for example, that would help. You can make juices. In honey, you can do it as well. Yes, you can have your rosehip, for example. I like putting just rosehip into honey and leave it for a couple of weeks and then strain it, and then you get this gorgeous rosehip honey, lovely flavor, vitamin C added, and it's very easy because you don't have to take all the hairs and everything out of the rosehip. So you just cut the top and the bottom, because for me everything always needs to be quite quick as well. I'm not that patient. You can also, what's really good is garlic honey. Chop garlic, put it in a jar, cover it with honey, leave it overnight. This is a really good remedy if you feel any sign of any infection. Strain it next day, or you can just leave it even, and then just take a spoonful of that every day, if it's acute, 2 or 3 times a day. Okay, and then obviously add them to your meals as much as possible. So cumin, caraway, fennel when cooking the cruciferous vegetables, so your cabbages, broccoli, mushrooms we talked about. Use rosemary. Rosemary is a great herb. It's good for the liver support. It's really good for detoxification. It's good for improving circulation and also for memory. Yeah, to improve circulation to the brain in particular. So that's a great one. Okay, and we're almost there. Fermentation. Obviously, you can ferment vegetables and herbs together. So if you do something like this, where you have red and white cabbage, I love it. If you ferment that together with cumin, caraway, turmeric, ginger, and then you have a few spoonfuls a day, especially before meals, that's very helpful, and it really helps digestion. You can use powders and mix them in. You can make herbal drops. I've done a little recipe there for digestive drops. So basically it's just a mixture of powders, a bit of water with honey mixed in, and you make a paste, and then you roll them into little balls, and then you dehydrate them at about 40-50 degrees. And it's wonderful. It keeps overnight, and you can take it with you if you're traveling or if you're going anywhere and you have maybe digestive issues, or you can make an immune one where you put some of the antiseptic herbs in them, and then you can eat those. It's a bit like in Tibetan medicine, for example, where they also use powdered herbs in an Ayurveda and so on. Yeah. Vinegars is a bit like a tincture, but you use a vinegar instead. So if somebody wants to avoid alcohol, plus it's obviously then better as alkalizing for the body. And you can freeze it though, the vinegars, because the problem with vinegars is they don't last as long as tinctures. So tinctures are they're very robust. They just don't go off. I have some tinctures 6-7 years old sometimes, and they're still really good. And then you can make infused oils. So I know someone's going to talk about essential oils, but if you don't want to or can't have access to essential oils, then you can make infused oils where you basically just get the compounds, the plants, and you put them in oil, and then you can either leave them in the sun for a couple of days. So this is, for example, this is St. John's wort oil, and you can see it's lovely in red. So you pick the St. John's wort, put olive oil over it, and leave it in the sun. And that's really wonderful for healing. St. John's wort oil. If you don't do anything else, definitely always every year make your own St. John's wort oil, because it's the best thing for any burns, any cuts, any grazes, any scarring, anything. really. Yes.
Thank you,
Okay.
Lindsay.
And then wonderful.
Yeah.
And then just finally, I've put some resources there as well. And so different books that you can have a look at. There's some online courses as well. And yeah, if anyone's interested, I'm going to be doing an online course starting in January. So just get in touch if anyone's interested in that too. Okay.
That's great. Thank you very much, Susanne. That's wonderful information, and I hope we can all absorb some of it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot, and hopefully it'll be recorded, and so people can return to it. And if you could put your contact in the chat box, maybe then we can
Sure, will do.
We can use it as a resource. Thank you very much. It was
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Okay, thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. It struck me, Susie, you emphasized the identification of herbs as being very important in the field. And short of having an expert with us, such as yourself, there are some apps which you can take a photograph of a plant now, and it will identify the plant precisely. But of course, if you have someone who's experienced the foraging, all the better. You can go on walks in the wood and pick herbs, fresh herbs. The great Dr. Schultz, who I'm an admirer of as a herbalist in America, emphasizes the ability of anybody to pick the right herbs and macerate them, as Bashir was saying, in either cider vinegar or alcohol to make and strain them to make a tincture which will last for at least a year, and if not more. And so there are many ways in which we can take care of our health, but it is our responsibility in the end, unless we are parents, in which case it's our responsibility to take care of our children and to see that they get the education that will sustain them in that situation, because it's not only wise, it's fun. To know nature and to be with nature is one of the best educations that children can have. And I thank you both for giving your extensive wisdom, and hope we can have this recorded so that people can come back to it and glean as much information as possible from it.
Govinda, can I ask a question to Susie, please?
Yeah, please.
I was just curious about the actual difference between the herbal remedies and the essential oils, which are also derived from herbs. Can you sort of clarify that, and in what way the herbal tinctures are somehow different?
Yeah, sure. It's the process. So if you use herbal medicines, it's in the way that I described it, the tinctures, the powders, the so on. And if you use essential oils, they're usually distilled. And so they're very concentrated. So you, in order to produce, a little bottle of lavender, you use half a field of lavender. So they're very, very concentrated. And I would always recommend not to use them internally unless you really dilute them very, very strongly. Whereas with the plants, you can just go out and you can pick the plants and you can make like an infused oil, and but it's much more diluted. Yeah, so you can still use it in the same way as you would use an essential oil, but it's more diluted. That's the difference. Yeah.
Perhaps we could.
I have a follow-up question on that also, and it was mentioned earlier about these smartphone apps that you can use the camera on it to identify it. In your experience, is that a proper, safe way to do it?
Yeah, they're pretty good. The one I've got is the Plant ID one, PlantNet. Sorry, it's called PlantNet, and it's not bad. Actually, it's not bad. The list that I gave you, they are all completely safe, and you can't really confuse them with anything else other than mullein, which I mentioned, which can sometimes the leaf looks very similar, can look similar to a foxglove. And that's obviously a problem, yeah, because foxglove is digitalis, which is a heart remedy, really a heart remedy is made out of that one. But that's why that's why I was saying with the mullein, it needs to be really soft. It's a very soft leaf. It's got little white hairs on it. It's quite fleshy and it's quite mucilaginous, yeah. But all the other ones on the list, they are all really easy to identify, so they're all safe. Yeah, you can't really confuse them with anything else. Those ones.
That's great.
Yeah?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great.